Hello everyone. Today, I'll continue telling you the love story of two Sam and Officer Lee. I hope you enjoy watching the video. In those days, Sam and Lee's life passed by at an unusually slow pace. So slow that at times Sam felt as if she were living in a forgotten pause, detached from the rest of the world. There were no more sleepless nights buried in overwhelming work, no harsh neon lights spilling through the window at midnight, and no sudden phone calls that made one's heart jolt in the dark. Instead, there was only a small, modest house tucked quietly along a red dirt road, silent throughout the year. In front of the house lay a lush green vegetable garden. Behind it stood a few fruit trees already heavy with ripening produce, signaling that harvest season was near. Everything was so still it felt as though time itself had learned to slow down, slow enough for people to breathe, to think, and to truly feel. In the afternoons, when the sunlight softened, Sam would go out to the garden earlier than usual. Hands once accustomed to keyboards and paperwork had grown rougher, yet moved with a natural ease. She pulled weeds, loosened the soil, tended each vegetable bed, and watered them carefully. Lee was often nearby, sometimes rolling up his sleeves to help her, other times simply leaning against the wooden fence, quietly watching her work. They didn't need many words. Silence no longer meant distance. Instead, it became their own shared language. Just being close, breathing the same air, was enough to warm their hearts. That morning was no different. A peaceful morning like so many others. Gentle sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting pale golden streaks along the path. Morning dew still clung to the eaves and rested on the branches, covering the space in a delicate haze. The breeze whispered softly through the leaves, so faint that if one didn't pay attention, it could be mistaken for the breath of the earth itself. Sam stepped into the garden just as the sun peeked over the distant tree-line. The morning air was cool, mist still lingering, and she instinctively took a deep breath. She bent down to pull weeds between the rows of vegetables, her movements slow and steady, like a habit deeply ingrained in her body. Water from the watering can soaked into the soil, releasing a familiar earthy scent that evoked an indescribable sense of peace. Sam scattered some grain for the chickens. They came running from nowhere, gently pecking at the kernels. Their soft sounds broke the stillness of the morning in the gentlest way. Dewdrops still clung to the leaves, sparkling in the early sunlight like tiny fragments of memory. Watching them, Sam's breathing slowed, and her heart softened without her realizing it. Yet even in that tranquil moment, a quiet longing stirred, slipping into her heart without warning. Sam found herself thinking of her father. He was living in the crowded city, among unfamiliar streets where life moved relentlessly fast, and people rarely stopped to ask how others were doing. She wondered what he was doing at that very moment, whether he was eating properly, whether his health was still okay, or whether there were times he felt exhausted, sitting alone in a cramped room with no one by his side. Many times Sam stood still holding her phone. The screen would light up, then go dark again. A familiar name appeared, then vanished. Her finger hovered over the screen. Just a little courage was all it would take to call. But then she would sigh softly and set the phone down, as if afraid of touching her own vulnerability. The distance between father and daughter wasn't just physical. It was filled with old memories that hadn't healed, words left unsaid, unresolved misunderstandings, apologies never spoken. And so that longing was tucked away once more, resting quietly in her heart, silent like the morning in the small garden, peaceful yet filled with so many unnamed emotions. While Sam lived through days that were quiet and delicately peaceful, Lee was forced to return to the familiar grind of his work, where no delay or distraction was permitted. The moment he stepped into the unit, he felt the tension in the air. Meetings followed one another. Faces were heavy, voices low but resolute. Serious cases were brought to the table one after another, stacking up like incomplete puzzle pieces. Drug gangs were showing signs of increased activity. No longer hiding in the shadows as before, they had grown bolder and more aggressive, ready to confront anyone in their way. The numbers in the reports were cold and impersonal, yet behind them lay human lives, families that could be destroyed by a single wrong decision. Lee understood that all too well. He sat upright, eyes fixed on every line of the report, committing each detail to memory. Even the smallest mistake, a single misjudgment, could lead to unimaginable consequences, not just for himself, but for his teammates and countless innocent people. The prolonged tension kept Lee in a constant state of high alert, like a string pulled so tight that even the slightest touch could make it snap. The meeting ended in the late afternoon. Lee stepped into the hallway, his mind still tangled in unresolved thoughts. He adjusted his jacket as he walked, about to return to his office when his gaze suddenly stopped on a figure standing in the distance near the public reception area. The man stood amid the unit's bustle yet seemed strangely out of place. His back was slightly hunched, his posture weary, hands clasped tightly at his chest as if unsure where to put them. His eyes darted around, filled with hesitation, caught between hope and fear. Lee's heart stuttered. The image was painfully familiar, so familiar that it made him stop in his tracks. It was Sam's father. The man recognized Lee first. He hurried over, his face marked with deep lines of worry and fatigue. His voice trembled, his breathing uneven, his hands clenched tightly as if trying to hold back something surging within his chest. He didn't beat around the bush or offer long explanations. He said only one thing, short yet urgent, as though pouring all his courage into it. He wanted to see his daughter. Lee froze for a moment. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. About Sam, about the quiet burden she carried, about the time she picked up her phone only to put it down again. But when Lee looked into those pleading eyes, he knew he had no right to refuse. This wasn't a request. It was the plea of a father who had waited far too long. He quickly set his work aside, gently reassuring the man and telling him not to worry. Then Lee led him to the car. The door closed, and the vehicle pulled away from the unit, carrying with it a reunion delayed by time for far too long. During the drive, neither of them spoke much. The man sat in silence, staring out the window, his eyes rimmed with red. Lee drove more slowly than usual, as if afraid that moving too fast might make this moment slip away. When the car stopped in front of the porch, Sam stepped outside as she always did, her hands still scented with soil and leaves. She hadn't yet understood what was happening when her eyes met a sight that seemed to freeze time itself. There, standing before her, was her father, thinner, older, but still the same man she had thought of during countless quiet mornings. Father and daughter stood facing each other, neither able to speak. All surrounding sounds faded away, leaving only the pounding of their hearts. Sam stood frozen, lips trembling, eyes filling with tears. She was afraid that if she blinked, the image before her would dissolve like a fleeting dream. Then all the emotion she had suppressed for so long burst free. Sam broke down in tears and rushed forward, wrapping her arms tightly around her father as if afraid that letting go would make him disappear again. The man stood still at first, as though unable to believe what was happening, then slowly lifted his arms to hold his daughter. His shoulders trembled, his breathing heavy, his hand resting on Sam's back as if to confirm that she was truly there. Lee stepped back, giving them space. He said nothing, only watched quietly. Inside him, an indescribable sense of relief spread. Like an invisible burden Sam had carried for so long had finally found a place to rest. And in that moment, Lee knew that some battles require no guns or weapons, only immense courage, just like the reunion unfolding before his eyes. Inside the small house, once the door closed, the atmosphere gradually settled into silence. The gentle scent of hot tea spread through the kitchen, while the steady ticking of the wall clock echoed softly, as if reminding everyone that time was still moving forward. Sam's father sat across from her, his hands resting on his knees, his posture showing signs of weariness after the long journey. He began to speak, slowly and cautiously, as though afraid that if he spoke even a little too fast, everything might vanish. He talked about his years in the city, about the difficult struggle to make a living in the beginning, about days spent working relentlessly just to get by. Then he spoke of an unexpected stroke of luck, the lottery ticket that changed everything. With the money, he bought a spacious, comfortable house and no longer had to worry about daily meals. Life gradually stabilized, something he had never dared to imagine before. As he spoke, his eyes lit up, filled with pride mixed with hope. He looked at Sam for a long moment, his gaze full of longing. He said that now he had the means, that he could give her a better life, one without the hardships she had endured before. He wanted to bring her to the city to live with him, to make up for the years of deprivation and sacrifice she had suffered because of him. Sam listened in silence. She didn't interrupt, nor did she argue. Inside her, joy and confusion intertwined. She was genuinely happy for her father. Happy that he no longer lived in hardship. Happy that he had finally found the stability he had always longed for. Yet at the same time a quiet unease crept in, seeping into her thoughts. Old memories returned without warning. The lonely days of her childhood, the time she endured in silence, the wounds that had never been clearly named. Though time had passed, they were still there, buried deep inside her, never truly gone. Sam feared that if she stepped into this new life, the past would repeat itself in a different form. When her father mentioned his second wife, Sam froze. The anxiety was unmistakable. Though it had been a long time, the unpleasant memories still weighed heavily on her heart. She remembered the cold stares, the careless yet cutting words, the moments when she felt like an unnecessary presence in her own family. Sam remained silent for a long while, as if questioning whether she was strong enough to face it all again. But when she looked up and met her father's earnest eyes, Sam took a deep breath. In his gaze there was remorse, a desire to make amends, and the fear of losing his daughter once more. In the end, Sam nodded slightly. She agreed to go to the city for a while, telling herself that perhaps she should give her father, and herself, a chance. The house in the city was exactly as her father had described. Spacious, bright, and fully furnished. Everything was new, polished, and orderly. Yet after only a short time, Sam realized that this abundance did not bring the sense of peace she had hoped for. Her days passed amid constant instructions, from household chores to nameless heavy tasks. The atmosphere in the house was always tense. The woman's cold eyes and harsh voice made Sam feel lost, like a temporary stranger in a place called family. Sam tried to endure it, telling herself that if she were just a little more patient, things would eventually get better. But with each passing day, the exhaustion inside her grew heavier, quietly yet persistently. At night, when the city lights came on, Sam lay alone in an unfamiliar room. Streetlights shone through the window, casting long streaks of light across the cold floor. In that moment, her longing for home became painfully clear. She missed the small garden, the scent of damp earth after watering, the quiet afternoons filled only with the sound of wind and leaves. And more than anything, she missed Lee, his steady gaze, his calm presence that made her feel safe. Lee was uneasy as well. Despite his busy work, he called Sam regularly, sometimes just to ask a few brief questions, sometimes simply to hear her voice on the other end of the line. Sam always said she was fine, her voice calm as if nothing were wrong. Yet it was that very calmness that worried Lee even more. He sensed the fatigue hidden behind her words, behind the short pauses in conversation. And deep down, Lee understood that Sam didn't belong there. Not in the bright yet cold city lights, but in the quiet places where she could truly be herself. After many sleepless nights, Sam finally made a decision. The vast city, the grand house, the materially comfortable life, all of it failed to make her feel safe, as she once believed it would. Every morning she woke up feeling empty. She stayed busy all day with nameless tasks, yet the more she worked, the stronger her sense of alienation became. It wasn't the hardship that broke her, It was losing sight of who she was. One evening, when the house had sunk into silence, Sam sat across from her father. She spoke slowly, her voice soft but resolute. She wanted to return to the countryside, to live the simple life she once had. The life where she could be herself, where her soul could breathe. Her father remained silent for a long time. His eyes were heavy, filled with regret and helplessness. He understood that he couldn't undo the old wounds, nor could he keep his daughter by his side with things she didn't need. In the end he nodded. No reproche. No attempt to hold her back. Just the quiet acceptance of a father learning to respect his child's choice, even though his heart was full of pain. The day Sam left the city, the sky was softly overcast. She carried only a small bag, nothing but a few clothes and unfinished thoughts. As the car moved forward, Sam looked out the window, watching the city slowly fade into the distance. There was no regret in her heart, only a sense of lightness, as if she had finally set down a burden she had carried for far too long. Back in the countryside, Lee had been waiting since early morning. The familiar dirt road was still covered in a thin layer of dust, the wind gently rustling through the trees along the path. He wasn't certain Sam would return that day. He only knew that if she didn't, the place would feel unbearably empty. He had checked his phone countless times even though no call had come. Then in the distance a familiar figure appeared. Slow footsteps, a small bag slung over her shoulder. In that moment Lee froze, his heart pounding so loudly he thought he could hear it. Only when he was sure it was truly Sam did he finally let out a long breath, as if releasing all the worry that had built up over the days. Sam saw Lee too. All the emotion she had suppressed during the months apart suddenly rushed back. She wanted to run to him to pour out all the bitterness, all the lonely nights in the city. But instead she stood still, eyes brimming with tears, lips trembling. The two of them walked toward each other slowly, without saying a word. When the distance between them closed, Sam looked up at Lee and forced a smile both relieved and fragile. Lee looked at her for a long time. He didn't ask, didn't blame, and didn't offer comfort with words. He only nodded gently as if to say, "You're home now. That's enough." Sam turned to look at the small house. The garden was still there. The familiar vegetable beds, the chickens wandering about, everything seemed unchanged. She bent down and touched the cool earth beneath her feet. Her throat tightened. Only in that moment did Sam truly understand. What she had been searching for was never abundance, but the feeling of belonging. Lee stood beside her, quiet as always. No promises were needed, no grand words. Just living ordinary days together, sharing simple meals, passing through peaceful afternoons. After all the upheaval, peace had finally returned, quietly, warmly, right in the place that felt most like home.
Xin chào mọi người, cảm ơn mọi người đã xem video hôm nay của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ và hạnh phúc. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu thích những câu chuyện mà mình chia sẻ và ủng hộ kênh cho mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hơn. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang phát hành những video vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng tại Việt Nam. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích những câu chuyện của mình thì nhớ bấm theo dõi và bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất, và chia sẻ kênh của mình để cho bạn bè mọi người cùng biết đến, để mọi người có thể lắng nghe những câu chuyện và để thư giãn sau một ngày làm việc mệt mỏi. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe một phút chia sẻ của mình. Hy vọng rằng sẽ gặp lại mọi người ở trong những video tiếp theo và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở trong video lần tới nhé.